Hello, everybody. My name's Tyler, and today we're fuck. This cold open really sucks because it's been a long time since I've done a podcast video. I've only been doing React videos for a little bit, so this I haven't done a podcast video in forever. And here with me is a friend of mine that I met through my wife. How should we address you as I continue to mess up this cold open? How do we? How
You can
would
use my
should we?
name.
How should we address you?
You can use my name. I'm no longer solely an internet personality, so you can call me Ryan.
Okay, Ryan is a former Twitch streamer who is now working on the grind for the swollenness of the Moses with the that can boast this. And this is a podcast where we spit the shit and the points don't matter, and I make a space to hang out with friends because I don't see them enough. But today is a
That's okay because
spook.
the list because that's okay because the list. I feel like there's gonna be some that we like can't talk about because we haven't played.
Yeah, because what the idea before, if we have time, the idea is to go through this to say, to I don't know a version of I don't. It's not smash or pass. It's uh, it's to agree or disagree with like their options of. So we're going to go through a list from CBR for 10 darkest video game settings. Settings being like the environment. And before we go through the list, for me, the most recent dark horror action gloomy setting video games that I've played in the past have been I've played recently Resident Evil. I have played through Five Nights at Freddy's. I have played through what is the word? What is a Outlast. That's those are the kind of settings that come up to mind right now. What are the most recent ones you've played, Ryan?
Not even necessarily most recently, but Cyberpunk is on my list. I would put things like The Last of Us on that list. I would put
Okay.
things like probably Fallout on that list as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Oh yeah,
Um,
Fallout. That's a game I
yeah,
forgot.
yeah. So Fallout's definitely on my list, and then um. maybe I would also say things like New World, more of like a more recent game. New World,
Oh.
in some ways, has some areas within that game where you can definitely feel a little bit on edge or like feel the eeriness of the game kind of
Mm,
like emanating out, which I think is
yeah.
pretty cool.
And
Um,
there's Diablo 4, which is a setting where you're fighting the hordes of hell coming against you, and Lilith and Beelzebub are breathing down your neck, that kind of setting.
yeah, yeah,
So,
100%.
mhm. And so the publisher, actually this was made 6 hours ago. Funny. I don't I don't know why the time of publishment makes it funny to me, but it's just like it's incredibly recent. But he defines dark settings to be grim, miserable settings filled with horror and apocalyptic scenes. Is that reasonable, or could it be expanded? That the definition of uh, dark game settings, can that be expanded beyond that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to that definition. I mean, I think I'd agree with most of that. I think that it doesn't necessarily have to be filled with horror for it to be horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it just depends on like your own definition of some of those words that they threw in there for the definition. So, but I'm cool with that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let me just clear up those tabs for a second. So let's go ahead and go down the list, and we'll see if we agree or disagree, and then we can probably. I would like to make our own list if possible, if we have time. So their number 10 is Darkest Dungeon. And do you know anything about this game?
I've never even seen it before, to be honest with you.
Okay. So it,
This is one of the ones on the list I like actually didn't necessarily know existed.
okay, because if I'm there is like, if I can pull up, I'm gonna on live on recording look up a on Steam because it sounds really familiar because of a video games series played by a friend of mine that I follow. And first, it's my mistake, but on their thumbnail it showed humongous manfuls on this dark priest that was very eye catching and very good for thumbnail making. So, this is showing on my recording. Whoops. Just oh, Dark Tide Warhammer. Warhammer is another like setting that we can like bring up.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree.
I've only ever played.
Or even like a Gears of War too.
Oh God, Gears of War is pretty grim too.
Yeah,
Oh, Blasphemous.
yeah.
I'm starting to see other titles in here too. Like Blasphemous is another one. Are you familiar with Blasphemous or?
No.
It's Blasphemous. I would say is a Dark Soulsvania kind of a game, but it's heavily based on church lore, or the dark, or like it's themed. I'm doing it justice. I will stop talking about Blasphemous, but it's a Castlevania, Metrovania type game. But Darkest Dungeon is an RPG. The world's a little more than away from Heart of Darkness incubated. I have nothing to say. It's definitely a dark setting. It's medieval. Um, Actually, no. I feel really bad for doing this all retroactively, but this makes for fun content, I guess. So, Darkest Dungeon. Okay, let's see what the synopsis say for this. Darkest Dungeon is a challenging gothic roguelike turn-based RPG about the psychological stresses of adventuring. Recruit, train, lead, and lead a team of flawed heroes against unimaginable horrors. Uh, can you keep your heroes together when all hope is lost? Okay, gothic setting. I can see how the setting can be dark, but I think that just also comes with the hashtag you put that under, I guess. So, um,
I've um I've got a big problem with this one actually.
how come?
Um, so I'm watching the trailer, the release trailer that's,
Right.
posted on the top 10 thing,
Uh huh.
and there's just no possible way. I get that maybe there's like a storyline behind it and stuff like that, and maybe that aids in the darkness, and maybe it's just the way that the video game is, or like who you're fighting, who the characters that you're playing are, and all that kind of stuff. But it's like I don't know how I would describe this kind of game, but it's almost like turn-based in a way,
Yeah.
or like side scroller, obviously. But I have like a big disconnect from that emotional side to those games.
Mm-hmm.
When it's like side scroller like that, and you walk up to an enemy, and then you're like making your decisions from there, I feel like it's a lot less dark for whatever reason. So already number 10, I'm not a fan of putting this specific game on the top 10 darkest games ever for that reason. It
I can.
almost kind of reminds me. Do you know what I mean? Like it's kind
Yeah.
of like one of those games. Like you see those trailers for those games where it's like, oh yeah, you could be like a mafia boss, and then it makes it look all crazy, and then you actually play the game, and it's just like, okay, you're just choosing options
Right.
basically.
If I were to look at the games, if I were to like put myself in place of the game setting, I can understand where it's a really dark setting because this is set back in maybe the 1400s, 1300s, maybe not, or like it's relative to the 1800s. You know, like close to Victorian, and it's dark because these are real people fighting against like eldritch horrors, skeletons, but how would you define a dark fantasy if that is what
Well,
it's being based
it's
on?
just that that doesn't separate itself enough. You know what I mean? Like that's like real people fighting like horrific monsters and stuff is not like a different video game take, or like a different, playable universe. There's games like that that exist, uh, that have forever existed that are just far more um emotional in the response that it triggers from you. Things like Skyrim come to mind, or
Uh-huh.
what's that new game that everyone was playing recently where you'd fight monsters and it's super super hard and um, Indeed.
That really that just sounds like, at that point that just sounds like any like, I think what the problem is like, to make a setting like this is to really pull people out of their expectations, if that makes sense. So because like from what you're telling me already, I'm already thinking about a lot of other games that are in that setting, but it's not defining of a environment I don't want to be a part of, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah,
like from
no, I'd agree with that.
because if I were, because like if it's a dark setting where you fight big monsters, I'm and it's Victorian, I'm already thinking about Bloodborne. Bloodborne's a game is, especially during the wild hunt, I wouldn't I would not want to be in that city, because if I'm in that city, either animals will kill me, people who have tasted the blood will kill me, or the hunter who's trying to solve the problem will also kill me because he can't discern between who has the sickness and who doesn't. So, if I was in Bloodborne, I would not like to be a hunter. If I was just taken out of here right now, and I would plop into that world in just my red T-shirt and underwear, I would not like to be there. I would not like to be in a lot of places with my underwear and T-shirt, but that's a place where I'd not like to be in within that setting. But then Darkest Dungeon doesn't give me that kind of feeling, and I can agree to that. Like
Right.
it feels vanilla from, because like it's very generic. It plays safe, and I think I'm hoping that as we
That's
go
kind
down
of
the list,
how I feel, yeah.
how you that's
I feel like the way that they describe the darkness in that game, it is also something that could be a descriptor for many other games that kind of fit that sort of genre, and those games I think elicit that response a little bit better than this one. Having not played the game, I don't want to annoy anyone that's played the game before and thinks that this should be number
it
one
is
on the list or something
trash.
like
It's rated 10 out of
that.
10. It's not number 1 out of 10. It's trash. I'll say it right. I'll say it
Right.
so you know. So you don't get heat. I'm getting heat because it's trash. This Darkest Dungeon is trash on this list by CBR. So if you go down to the link, you go to the article link, you can yell at them for making a trash list. You can look at me saying you're dumb. I'm going to prove you wrong by looking at the list myself. You're wrong, Tyler.
That's perfect. And I think we should
Next,
move
yep.
on to number nine because I
What's
think
what
this one I'll also have a couple opinions about.
you want to read off on what number 9 is?
No, go for it. Go for it.
Okay, the next game that they said is not the number 1, but the darkest setting is Cyberpunk 2077. Um when you, I wouldn't know where to start about this, cuz like, would you, it's considered like science fiction horror, I guess, just because we haven't come to an age where we can make prosthetics that are sci-fi based, but we're so dependent on our phones already, but not in regards to machinery. We're only like so dependent as when the next bus comes in, or when your car's broken down. But Cyberpunk puts you in a situation to where everyone's getting modded. If you're not chromed up, you are discriminated against or to. Point being, there is a large divide of people who want to be chromed up with modifications, and there are those who services people who want to be chromed up. Do you agree?
Cyberware is kind of like a status symbol in the world, I would say.
Okay, so you've played this before, right?
Yeah, this is the one. This is the one on the list that I've played. The only one on the list that I've played.
I have not played it. Are you? Can you give me like a quick like synopsis about what the game's about, or this? Can you of the setting
I
rather?
mean,
What's the
yeah,
Cyberpunk?
I mean, you covered it decently there with what
Oh, I
you
did.
said. I mean,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's kind of the idea of the game is that it is set in the future. It's set in a world where cyberware, which is technology that's worn on the body or implanted in most cases, is seen as a status symbol. There's a lot of advantages to doing it. It's a time where you could essentially recreate an entire person mechanically and implant their consciousness and their mind into that cyborg, let's say.
Okay.
And I think the reason it's on this list, and the reason why I might have it a little bit higher in my personal list, is because of the realism behind it. Just because of what you said, we're all dependent in this day and age on technology, so it's very possible that this is a look into the future, and I think that's kind of the sense that you get playing the game. Um, and I would say the world is very dark it's probably one of the coolest games that I've played in the sense that you do get the feeling that you're playing in a very bustling city while
Mm.
playing the game, which is really cool. A lot of games try to do that and don't do it well enough
Yeah, you're
because of
lived into the
the
city.
lack, right? Because of the lack of NPCs that are like walking around and stuff. But Cyberpunk does a great job at just giving you massive amounts of people and interactions and things like that. So you do get that sense that you're actually in like a living city. And I think because of that, the way that the people there are, I think it's not just a combination of the setting of where you're walking around, but also the people that you're interacting with and how cyberware becoming such a big part of everyone's life has changed them for the worse.
Mm.
And I think that's why it's probably on this list is because of that emotional response of being like, hey, this is something that I could totally see happening in the future if we continue down the path that we're on currently. And
Mm.
that's I think what makes it dark.
And like that's like we are. I feel like we are already seeing signs of this where in the emergence of ChatGPT and AI based videos like the AI scam regarding uh, Mr. Beast, we are at the worst phase of what uh, AI clickbait can be and AI marketing can be. We're at the worst version of what it can be, and it only gets better from here to where like even like you can be deep faked into being scammed. Uh, it was very convincing for the Mr. Beast video that I saw. Were you aware of this news or not really?
Not necessarily, but I kind of have an idea of what you're talking about. Basically, someone used a deep fake of Mr. Beast to scam people. Is what you're saying.
Yeah. I watched
Frame
it
like
on.
giveaway or something like that. That makes. I mean, yeah, I'm not
Mhm.
surprised.
Yeah, because I watched it. I watched the coverage about it from Most Critical and what is his name? It's essentially they're talking. The video encompassed Mr. B saying, "Congratulations, you are one of 10,000 people that can buy the new iPhone 15 for just $2. Click on the link and continue more." And that's like the scam that it sounded very much like Mr. Beast, and it this is the worst it'll ever be. And we have no defenses about it at this time. But let's go ahead and
Yeah, and I
yeah.
think I think yeah, I think Cyberpunk takes what we're living through right now in a direction that um, forces everyone to compromise and be, and basically make technology their idol,
Mm-hmm.
and it shows you the downsides and negatives to that. And one more thing I want to say about the game, there is no happy ending in Cyberpunk. It's one of those games where you get to choose like three, four different kind of endings to the game. Not a single one of, I mean, there's one that's regarded as the happy ending or the
Right.
good ending, let's say. It's not happy or good. It's not. And so I
There's
think
no
that's
Hollywood ending, is what you're saying.
there's no Hollywood ending. There's one where it's like, okay, maybe you feel a little bit better about the choices you made in the game as the player,
Mm-hmm.
but for the characters in the game, there is no happy ending. So
Okay. But the next title, actually for Cyberpunk, where would you place that on a scale of 10? Between one being the darkest setting to live in, or 10 being the least.
I'm probably giving it like an 8.7.
You'll move it
Like
up.
like I mean, if it were, well, I mean, having not played any of the other games on the list, I'd probably have it at number one on this list.
In regards to
Um,
this list, okay.
in regards to this list, but I would say in general, like if I was making a top 10, I think I put it on the list, but I think I do have it somewhere around 7 or 6. I think there's a few. I think I could come up with a few games that are a little bit darker, but it's up
Okay.
there.
Let's. I'll. I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna make this list as we go along. So we're not gonna include in this list Darkest Dark because I think we shared our opinions about it. So let's put Cyber at 7. But Dark Souls 3 specifically is number 8, and you've never played Dark Souls before, right?
No, I haven't, but it is unlike the first uh game on the list, Darkest Dungeon. I've known about the game for some time, so
Okay. If you don't mind this, would you like me to spark notes what the game's about for you?
yeah, go for it.
So essentially,
Speak on it.
what Dark Souls, as someone who's played the game on the channel, what Dark Souls 3 is a situation where this follows the timeline of the first Dark Souls game, but during this cycle of Dark Souls 3, there are 7 Lords of Cinder that you have to kill to bring to uh, the proverbial campfire, because what you are considered uh, an Ashen One, because you are the last of their last choices, because the world has gone to shit. These previous Lords of Cinder, they've they've summoned them to ask them to like reignite the flame to bring the world into prosperity or darkness. You're the last of their last options because all the previous help they've asked before did not want to do that again. So the main goal, as the lowest of the lowest possible options, is to kill these 7 Ashen Ones, Lords of Cinders, bring them back to the church, and hopefully restart the world into another 100 years of prosperity, or continue the cycle. Let the do not reignite the flame, and just like let the world continue to be a place where corpses reanimate, ghoulish fiends are everywhere, and there is no hope whatsoever around the world. You have that choice to either save the world or leave the world as it is, while in the process of killing other 7 Lords of Cinder that had your job before.
Okay.
Because like there's for
Uh,
some yeah, because for some reason in this story, nobody is dying. So the longer people aren't properly passed on, they come back more ghoulish, and they become more feral the more they revive. And so we're the last person to like try to do their job.
I gotcha. No, I'm looking at the trailer right now just to get an idea of the environment that you play in as the character, and kind of a little bit of an idea of what everything looks and feels like. So I can see why this is on the list. I don't have a problem with this one at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as someone who's played the game, I feel like this is a pretty dark side. Like the world is so desperate for someone to take them to like take them out of the Age of Dark, and they're asking you because they've asked all the previous employees of the month to help them out. Everyone's quitting their jobs and are making the world worse, so they're asking you to help. And this is a pretty difficult situation. I would not want to be here, and I agree for Dark Souls 3 to be on the list because uh, I'm someone who's played the game, but more importantly, someone looking in this as a story perspective. This is the worst the world has ever been, and you have the literal weight of the world to reset and make everything right, or you can just add on to the problem. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for that. Where are you putting it on your list?
I would, because in regards to putting myself in that situation, I would give it a solid 5, just because because of that premise alone, where it is you are the last hope of the last hope. There is no more magic in the world. All you have left is you and your sword and shield against impossible means, and you're gonna keep dying again. And the more you die, the more likely you will give up, unless you have the will to go beyond it. Otherwise, um, revive, go into a corner, stay safe, stay away, and let someone else take care of your job, right? But yeah, I'll put it at a 5
On your personal list, it's on a 5.
on my list, because for me, Cyberpunk
Okay.
is at a 7 as well, just because it's not the worst thing you can get into, but it's also a very hard society to be a part of as well. Because it's too real and related to what we're going through right now. It's low on the list.
Yeah, and I mean, based on what you described, I'm not trying to be in the Dark Souls universe one bit, so I'm cool at 5.
You're cool with 5? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go. Let's the next number 7 for CBR is Wolfenstein New World Order. What if the Nazis won? And I don't know. I have no feelings about the game just because I I've never played it, but the premise of it is essentially where what if the Nazis won World War II, and this is another chapter of can we will this be the game that we beat the Nazis? Um, how do you feel about what if the Nazis won the war?
I mean, this game looks insane. Um, I've never played it either, but I kind of want to play it now. It looks it looks a little crazy. I like it's weird having never played the game. I would almost have this higher on the list,
You
and I haven't played it yet.
what makes you want to put it higher on the list?
I mean, that's just so real. That's so real. You know what I mean? Like that's a alternative outcome that could have very well taken place.
Mm-hmm.
We'd like to think that there's no way that that could possibly have ever happened, but that's probably what people would have said before all the real life stuff did occur anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I would definitely put that at 3 for me.
yeah, I'm putting that at like 3. Like that seems like top 3 potential there. And I'm not I'm not trying to say that this game is a great game or better than Cyberpunk or better than Dark Souls in any way, shape, or form. But that sort of environment, yeah, I would not want to be involved in that at all. At least in Dark Souls, you're kind of like, one of those kind of like superhero esque characters, right? So at least you
Right.
get to have some
It,
abilities, and
and yeah, and sometimes you don't feel that way because when you start from the game, you pick up a reasonably weighted sword, and your tutorial boss, as I'm going to play the game, jumping into the world practically nude. Your first boss to double check if you are right for the job is a mini boss that is 3 times your size, has a halberd the length of a pool, and in the middle of the phase, he transforms with like a venom symbiotic like arm. So it skill checks you on how to dodge, and it skill checks you on are you the right are you the correct action one that will help save this world. So that's like a big ugh. It puts you to it puts you to place where am I actually the one to save the world? Should I actually just pick up? Should I get back up again if he kills me? Because you have like a little bit of a knife compared to a building. So like it's in the same vein of like
right?
Elden Ring almost. Let's go
Yeah, it
ahead.
looks like in this Wolfenstein game, you play as a human or humanoid style bipedal character,
Mm-hmm.
which I believe is a human in the game. And yeah, it looks like your weapon of choice is different kinds of guns, which look interesting. Looks like there's some futuristic things in there
Yeah.
as well. But yeah, I mean, you're just a human. There's a lot of variables to that. Sounds like in the Dark Souls game, you're a little bit more than human. So
Okay.
I'm cool with putting it top 3 or at least ahead of that for now. And then I'm a little bit curious about this next one. I think maybe anyone listening to this is going to be a little bit surprised that this would be a game on the list I haven't played. But go ahead with the next one.
Number 6 is Final Fantasy 13. I let's see what they say about it. The franchise has been few of its settings are bleaker than Final Fantasy 13. It initially takes place in a repressive futuristic society where people are trapped in the battle between different gods, forcibly turned into soldiers, and doomed whether they fulfill their goals or not. Funny enough, that just it reads like cyberpunk for some reason. Just because they're both
Yeah.
futuristic, they're both you are in a repressed situation to whether you should be chromed or not, um, and gods are kind of the same thing as corporate juggernauts in almost a sense. I can be wrong, and as a Final Fantasy fan, it makes more sense to say it like that to others who don't play Final Fantasy as a hobby. But it's not distinguishably wrong. I don't feel to compare gods to corporate overlords. Final Fantasy 13 opens with the government massacre of an entire city for suspicions of communing with one of the gods. Things get worse from there, and the later games pull no punches. By the end of the third installment, the world has gone so wretched that only ending it and creating a new one can help people. That's pretty bad. From that description, do you agree it being higher than Wolfenstein, or where should Final Fantasy 13 be placed in terms of setting?
It's definitely lower. It's definitely lower, and not to take anything away from the dystopian environment that you're in and stuff, because I think that, like what you described, it does sound a little bit like cyberpunk in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also seeing in the trailer that you have like spells and like special abilities and things like that. So when we're talking about like, hey, what environment would we least like? What would we least like to be put in? This isn't one of those for me because
Yeah.
I'm a superhero in the game.
I can
Are you
cast
kidding me?
fire
You know,
from my hands. I can
right,
freeze the
right.
water, Blizzaga. I can call
Not
lightning.
not to say, not to say that that's not challenging for those characters to go through
Mm-hmm.
and all that, but like I think that's part of my it's got to be part of my ranking system. Like,
Yeah.
do what if I had to swap and be this really be this character? How dark would that be? And this game is just simply too bright, too uh, futuristic is not the right fantastical. I guess that would be the right word for me to feel like I wouldn't enjoy parts of this um, universe. I think there's certainly a lot more parts about Final Fantasy that would be enjoyable to a real character experience in it than something like Wolfenstein.
But yeah, because like in Wolfenstein or in Cyberpunk, uh, you are in a setting to where you either have a gun, you have a chromed up enhancement, or you are dead. In Cyberpunk and in Wolfenstein, you have a gun, you have a scientific sci-fi based weapon, or you're nothing. In Final Fantasy, you have the opportunity for one of the core elements, and you have the chance to summon a god. That has a better chance of fighting your setting in comparison to the other two, which I agree. Final Fantasy 13 should be much lower, but I do understand the tagline where things are getting worse. Things get worse in the world to where the only way to save it is to reset the world. I can understand that being like that is as bad as Dark Souls. Um, but Dark Souls is better than 13 where there is actually no hope. And the only way to save the world is to actually do the other person's job. And that doesn't put you in a new place. That just makes things, it stabilizes, but it's still a pretty bad place to be a part of with Dark Souls 3. But in 13, you get the sliver of hope that you can make everything just right by ending it and recreating a new one. I don't know, like from that premise, I can understand where that can be grim, but you have a better fighting chance in one than the other. I don't know the title of Battleborn. Do you know what that is? Because they rank that as five.
Not familiar.
Let's see. Bright and colorful
I'll skim
game.
the I'll skim the trailer while you
Read.
read it.
Battleborn is a bright and colorful game with a range of larger than life characters. The Varselli have destroyed all but one star in the universe. The only remaining inhabitants face a fight for the universe's survival, but still can't put aside their differences. Okay, so cosmic horror story about a hopeless war covered with wacky humor and eccentric characters. If
So
I'm
what I'm getting right away, I have it's interesting. This is a game that looks almost like you could describe it as a mix between Cyberpunk and Final Fantasy.
okay, okay, I because isn't it if I remember correctly, unless I'm wrong, it's a MOBA. If I like look it up correctly, it's like it's basically a hero shooter is what it sounds like.
Kind of. It yeah, I guess. It looks first person. Um, but there's definitely like a fantastic aspect to it, and there's also a little scene here, it looks like, where there's a penguin controlling a robot. So I'm not necessarily all that like I like if you just skim through the trailer, it's not. I get that maybe the world or the story is dark in the background, but it's not. It doesn't seem like a dark universe to be a part of at all.
Okay, and apparently the game is not because there's an early shutdown of the game, so we never know if things get better because the game is not on Steam anymore. It's no, I don't think you can find Battleborn on the internet anymore, which I find, irony. There's a bit of irony to it, to where they already have the darkest timeline, their world not existing. So
Yeah, I
they
think
they're
that's probably the darkest thing about the game.
they're proverbially the number one darkest setting because their world ended, their game ended. But in terms of what the
Yeah,
game provides, I because you live in a world where it's a mixture of cyberpunk and Final Fantasy, from what you're describing, it's fine. I'll put it at 10 though. Where would you put it?
yeah. I don't think it makes like my personal list, to be honest, but I'd recategorize it on this list to
Mm-hmm.
10.
I'm
It's
not.
just
Mm-hmm.
it's too over the top and larger than life for it to be like super dark.
Yeah, because
Like
there's a
I like,
penguin.
you know what I mean?
There's a penguin controlling a mech, and even in
Right.
Overwatch 2, you have a hamster controlling a robot. So it's not as bad as you think. It's pretty lively for how dark the setting is. Next up,
Yeah.
they have on their list Half Life. I don't personally know what Half Life is, um, but from what it's saying, uh, the sequel to Half Life shows that things get much worse from the humanity gets much worse for humanity after the Zen invasion. So alien invasion, things get worse, and the combined invasion and crush the combined invasion and crush Earth's militaries. I, I'm having a hard time reading. I don't know if it's because of the guy's sentence structure, but it's just really hard for me to read. The combined invasion, the combine invade and crush Earth's militaries in several hours before instating a pointless draconian rule. Oh, it's called the combine. Okay, the combine invade and crush Earth's militaries. Okay, I swear I passed preschool. I swear I passed basic reading, but that was really hard for me to read. Um, but yeah, it sounds like you're trying to survive and like live through a new installment from the alien uh, element. How do you feel about that? Is that pretty
Yeah, I'm
dark?
cool with this being. Yeah, I'm saying it is because you definitely play as like a human character.
Hmm.
You know, no special abilities, no nothing, and it's just set in like it is a little bit more of like post-apocalyptic than I think the article maybe gives it credit for. Like it's post-alien invasion, from
Yeah.
what I know about it. Not like you play the game when it starts. It's like you're playing the game when you're trying to pick up the pieces from that.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'd say it makes my list. I've never played it before. I played Half-Life a little bit, the original one.
Hmm.
Not Half-Life 2, but I can only imagine it's probably just as eerie and creepy in that regard.
Okay. But what beats out Half-Life 2 is Dead Space, as we actually just discussed, where I don't like the idea that we have to planet frack an entire world just to get resources. It's so bad we have to kill worlds to obtain their minerals and accessories. But according to the article, they say necromorph outbreaks caused massacre by undying monstrosities are bad enough in their own right, but taking place against an even harsher backdrop, which is the elusive marker that's looming over the plot of the game. Are you familiar with Dead Space?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. I haven't played it, but very familiar with the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would, as an you're plopped in as an engineer with the proverbial equivalent to Scientology. You with that kind of a background and uh, hints at a dark universe. The space is a dead place with humanity finding nothing but ruins and desolation if they find any signs of alien activity at all. And all you're equipped with are mining gears and a wrench to fight against the alien invasion and henceforth like infection. Uh,
And correct me if I'm wrong, but most of the game is set in space, right? Like you play in space.
yeah,
You're not
yeah.
like
The
on
majority
Earth,
the majority is not. Yeah, you're far from Earth. It's either a space station or
right?
you're jumping between planets, but you're still on a space station where if the ship is broken, if the ship blows up or you lose power, you are trapped in space.
Right. Right. Yeah. So I'm saying that's definitely on my list. That's kind of like it's almost like being in a game where you're on like a life raft in the middle of the ocean. Like death is imminent. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing you can do about it. Or better example is probably what was experienced by the group of people that died on that submarine that went to go see the Titanic. Like I mean, it's kind of like a real life
Oh,
version of Dead
that
Space,
that's
right?
that is quite the real example of what Dead Space could be like. Um, if it's just as bad being in a submarine that imploded on itself, can you imagine imploding in uh physical dead space where there's nothing between you and Earth, and well, except a large galaxy between you and Earth or any help. But that's really freaky. I would put that in number two, and on my list. Uh, would you agree with
Yeah,
that for yours, or where would you place that?
I'd agree with it. I haven't played the game obviously, but yeah, I mean it's a very real. Again, like that kind of hits that emotional realism response where it's like, yeah, in the future, if there is some form of space exploration, there's probably some people that will have certain feelings that the game elicits in real life where, you know, you feel very isolated, very vulnerable on a spacecraft. You know, things are maybe trying to. I mean, I'm like not 100% sure about this claim, but I'm pretty sure at either at one point or relatively recently, there's been some talk about having some sort of like space force, as in like a space military, like some countries wanting to have a space military or an outer space force of some kind. And yeah, like imagine you had countries that were going to war with each other in outer space. Like that seems terrifying.
And also like
I don't.
so cool at the same time. I feel
Yeah,
bad
also
for
pretty
what
cool.
it's like on the basis I any type of war is really bad, and any type of war affects the community in its own way. But also, we have been making movies about this since the 90s and 80s. We're a little ecstatic
Ender's
that we
Game.
can finally do it. And we've written it in Ender's Game and Ender's Shadow and all the books those this mod. We've been writing about space wars before Space War to finally do space wars on a galactic scale around the Earth is going to be pretty cool. It's going to leave a lot of people with mixed feelings, especially the nerds who think we'll have lightsabers by then. Unlikely, but again,
Also, not practical. Lightsabers would probably be the most impractical thing if you had the technology of like blasters and stuff like that. I get in Star Wars, the characters can deflect blaster shots with their lightsabers as if that would actually be possible if
right.
blasters were real.
If you had the actual like reflex to block shots, that's thousands of years in advance that we have to
Right.
go through. But what might get
Besides, I
closer
can just choke you out with force anyways.
it's
Yeah.
ridiculous, but what might be closer to home than actual lightsabers is Bioshock. Bioshock reaches number 2 on this list. Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, good segue.
Yeah, Bioshock is essentially a. It's set in the, I believe, 1920s. It's what if the world started to end in the 1920s, and Bioshock puts you on Rapture, where what if it's a land of lawlessness and you can do extreme science and ventures of the like, right? So, um, it's on an isolated city far below the ocean. Uh, the sheer horrific state makes most games pale in comparison, where you are shot from a submarine into Rapture, and your goal is to find somebody. And all the while, you are exposed to psychological horror, mental horror. There's children that may shoot you with lightning, and there's people that might crawl at you like a spider. Um, and it plays on science and quantum mechanics that could be real if we allowed that inhumane uh, testing to go through. I would say it's reasonable for being high, just because it's set in that like time. How do you feel
Yeah.
about? Do you have any feelings about Bioshock from the time you've watched it or played it?
I think it deserves a spot on the list. Um, I think there's definitely elements of the game that they're not like your character has like superpowers, but
Mm-hmm.
like you can do some things that really shouldn't a normal person wouldn't be able to do, right? But I think and it's usually it's kind of like it's like a game that uses like chemical warfare
Mm-hmm.
as its main objective, and not in the sense and not in the way that we've ever seen that play out in real history, but in the sense that like um, chemicals are used to give you abilities to it's I don't know, I haven't actually played the game, but I'd imagine it's something you're fighting over in the game, like control of those resources
Right.
to an extent.
Oh.
So
Mm-hmm.
I think that your character has the ability to like do certain things because of these chemicals that you like a real human wouldn't be able to do. But
Mm-hmm.
the way I'll separate that from say something like Final Fantasy, where I feel like you're playing as like a superhero, is the abilities that your character gains from this aren't good. They're not like fun. They wouldn't be enjoyable. It's not like you're jumping over a building. You're like stabbing yourself with a syringe and then releasing a swarm of yellow jackets out of your arm. The only
Yeah,
reason they
because
come out of your arm is because they eat your flesh away. So it's like it's not like your powers that you have aren't enjoyable, and it doesn't make it any better.
right, because like already at the thumbnail that projects like on this website already shows you with the really with your hand being mutilated. That's not a great way to start off. Like it's definitely a clickbait thumbnail for sure, but like that sets a premise to the whole thing because the tagline for this uh, entry is that Rapture's a city, as it'll show you in the game, but Rapture's downfall is entirely due to human failing. Its objectivist philosophy directly leads to the people becoming power hungry, callous, and resentful. Environmental storytelling suggests that Rapture is an unpleasant place to live for most people, even prior to its collapse, because it's a dark setting. It's made for people who have an objectivist kind of philosophy, and who would disregard moral and ethics for science and advancement. That's not great to be a part of. I would not like to be experimented on by someone who promises me sugar but actually gives me vinegar. That's a pretty dark setting as it is. Just because of like it does there have been articles about the whole Bioshock content based on its philosophies. Um, I would like to play the game when I get the chance to, just because of its whole aspects. Um, where'd you rate it? I would rate it at like I would move down most of my items so that it can be placed number two, just because of how philosophical it can get. And I can understand its reasonings when deep diving it into like what the game is about and so forth. For me, it'll be moved. Everything will be moved down, so for it to be number two for me. Um, where would you put it?
I probably put it below Dead Space.
Yeah.
I probably put Dead Space before it, but I'm not combative with your reasoning on why you'd put it at number two. I'm fine with that, but
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a little lower on my list, probably just due to the slightly unreal nature of the game. I think the other ones for me would hit a little bit harder just because of the realism behind it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can. For me, it makes the reasoning is sound just because of how the setting in Dead Space for me is definitely a separation of what today could be. Just because it could be thousands of years before we get to a point where we make football stadium sized spaceships before we make outfits that can propel us in space. That's a lot more potentially possible than thinking back to what the 1920s had in store for us when the whole entire premise of Bioshock 2, and Bioshock 2 is based on that time period. So that's less likely. I can I'm more detached from with Dead Space than I am with uh, Bioshock because we're so close to history with that. And
I'm willing to honor that point. I don't want to dishonor it.
it's okay. I don't like your idea either because Dishonored is allegedly the number one darkest timeline possible, according to CBR. CBR uh, discusses Dishonored. I played the game too, by the way, but I do like your
Good, good.
like segue, clap and a half. Dishonored setting matches its broad stories of revenge and honor. Um, all the Dishonored games take place and in industrial era world with all the associated flaws. So, as someone who's played it, this is basically in the same premise of I would say the 1820s because of it's set in that kind of a time frame where the Industrial Revolution is kind of just starting, sometime after us starting our country. Takes place in Boston, and everything from the kings and queens and the fear of the plague is possibly there. But let's see. I'm sorry for the all the uhs and ums. Um, the article states that, however, its cosmology and technology means there are even worse. There's even worse than dire social stratifications, corruptions, and environmental damages. Dishonored civilization exists in an entirely hostile world in a universe that is little better. Anything anywhere outside the empire of the Isles provides almost inhabitable. The empire isn't much better, swept by plague and extreme poverty. The Void added a dark touch, providing game only afterlife in a setting where people wander forever until they are devoured. The game's good ending suggests the queen will improve the world, but she has a long way to go. So, yeah, definitely like it's a situation where you're in a world with eldritch horrors. It deals with a lot of eldritch magic and horror, and I don't agree with it being number one, just because it's a lot less believable than Dead Space because Dead Space is so much more tangible. But in regards to Dishonored, I could see where the merits come from because we like the aesthetics of the 1820s, the 1850s. We hate that the Black Plague happened, but it's very viable here. It's for us the Black Plague is nothing new. The Black Plague is happening right here with all the rats and the rats infested like waters and corruption of the kings and of like the queens of the isles and stuff like that. I can understand it. I don't like it being a number one. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I probably don't like it being at number one either. I'm watching the trailer, and I there's definitely aspects of it that I think would probably keep it on the list here. Um,
I think it's a
but
Bethesda
again,
game, right?
yeah, I want to say
Okay.
it looks like a Bethesda game.
Because like
Um,
like not to knock it down, but not to. I'm sorry for interrupting you, but I have played like I for me I love the setting just because it made me love the characters, but it didn't make me scared of the environment because of the eldritch magic you can touch on. As a character, you have the option to play with or without eldritch magic, and you still feel very powerful despite the settings. So it's not a number one for me
yeah,
because you still feel powerful regardless.
yeah, I
But
think
you're
that's
saying
fair. I mean, I think the I actually love the architecture and the scenery in the game and the kind of eeriness to it. I think it I don't know. I mean, I actually just it looks awesome. Like just playing in the world looks pretty awesome. So I mean, this might be one of the games on the list where I'm like, hey, I might have to actually play this game, and maybe that would help me understand why it's on the list a little bit more. But I can see why it's here, and yeah, I don't have any issue with you discrediting it from the number one spot. I don't think it's number one. I mean, I think being that I've only played Cyberpunk, I'm putting Cyberpunk pretty high up on the list. I don't know if it's number one, but on this list, it certainly is for me.
because like I will say one of my favorite characters is Granny Rags, and Granny Rags is a character you approach because you come across these bone charms, which uh, is a thing where certain bones have certain carvings, and certain carvings gives you buffs or abilities in this game. And how she became Granny Rags is she came across a titular island, got touched by eldritch horrors, and then maimed her husband to draw the sigils that she saw into his bones, being the founder of bone shards and magic made available to the public. And she is then marketed as Granny Rags. So that's her setting, but like
Yeah,
it's I say my favorite character just because of how ridiculous how the journey that she took to get to be called Granny Rags, and she is your person that sells or helps you create bone charms. It's crazy how she got here, but I like her journey to get there, and she is the sweetest thing, if uh not all right when you look at it from like okay you're speaking in weird things, but I like what you're helping me. I like the things you're helping me use. So for me, that's like Rainy Rags is kind of a fun character to like divulge into. The fact that she started off by like she's been a peaceful aristocrat, and then she went to the Isles because she's a rich lady, so of course she would like to try these exotic visits and exotic things, and then becomes mad with magic. And hello, hubby, would you like to be a part of my magic? And let's like just carve you left and right to draw these funny pictures I saw in our vacation, and you become the bone charms that starts off my entire entrepreneurial business in this desolate land. Isn't that fun, dear? You get to help me with my at-home DIY project in this pandemic that we're facing with rats and plague. uh,
yeah. I mean, so tell me this then. Where is it on your list?
I would say like on my list I would say based on what I've written down I would say it's above Wolfenstein. only because your accessibility to guns and um, weapons is it's a lot. It's you feel a lot safer with the guns and sci-fi weapons you have in Wolfenstein, but in this game your only abilities are your only access to weapons are knives, swords, musket-sized weapons, and you have to. They actually like show you the animation of you cocking the weapon, putting in the gunpowder and the beads, and loading it back up, or crossbows. It's weapons it's weapons that fit the era, plus a little magic, but it's the weapons that make you
Sure.
feel like the weapon can break on you because that's how engineering works back then in the 1820s.
Yep. Yep.
That's how like untrustful and reliable the weapons are back then.
And I'm sure it doesn't play this way in the game, but muskets are extremely unreliable and extremely inaccurate.
If I remember
So,
correctly, yeah, yes, because if I remember correctly, the crosshairs for the muskets and the hand cannons you get aren't reliable. But what is reliable is a nicely made crossbow gun that is small, compact for an assassin, and when you fire it, it shoots truer than a musket. So it, in terms of weaponology, it is titular to the time. It's pretty accurate to its time, and you can technically have a no kill run by knocking everybody out. There's a lot of ways to play Dishonored as a franchise. I feel like the third game was unnecessary because, case in point, I did my best to play the first hour of the game. I turned off that game and I returned it to GameStop. I don't know why. I don't know why I it came to a point where I didn't understand why I was playing the third game. Maybe because I enjoyed the first two games, but for the protagonist that I was following didn't give me a reason to continue the story. Because the character you follow in 3 is a side character in 2, but there's not enough investment in 2 to make you feel for the side character turned protagonist. Um, I don't know if that's kind of a spoiler, but um, that's my feeling.
that's okay.
I just don't know if
That's
that's the,
okay. I mean, it doesn't have to be a spoiler. There's a decent chance I may never play the game. So,
'cause we already have a
I mean,
library of games as it is, but um,
yeah, I've got plenty to go through, but I don't know. There's a few games that are on this list that I was interested or intrigued by learning about, and
mhm.
there's definitely a couple that I might have to play for the first time that I've never played before.
Is there a game from here that you definitely want to play? Because for me, it's Dead Space, and it's it's partially because of the remakes that they're starting to have. Like I heard there is there okay, hold on. Before I start talking about Dead Space 2 remake. Okay, so at the moment there's only Dead Space 1 remake is only available. Dead Space 2 and 3 remake is only possible is only going to be possible with like certain criteria met, but essentially the concepts of deep space and being an engineer is kind of fun for me. It's just like Dead Space alone, and the concept of it has been pretty. It's been on my radar for a long time. It's on the list of things I want to play. Anything from you for you that stands out that you want to play?
Yeah, I mean, I would have probably chosen Dead Space 2, but just for the sake of having a different game to talk about, I gotta play the Final Fantasy games, and not necessarily that I felt it deserved a spot on this list in any sort of way, but it's a series of games I've literally never played at all. I've
Mm-hmm.
known about my entire life, it seems, and there's no good reason why I've never picked up a single one of the games and ever tried it out. It's a little bit different in style than
Mm-hmm.
other games that I've played, so I think it might be kind of interesting. It almost looks like a live action version of Pokemon in a way. Um, or what I would imagine like a Pokemon game to be like if you could make like real time decisions with the characters in terms of like abilities and stuff like that,
Which
which
title?
I guess is a thing. I guess that is a thing. I'm not trying to say that that's not already a version of Pokemon that exists. I think that is a thing, but
For Final Fantasy, I don't think there is a Pokemon version of Final Fantasy. No, I don't think so. But there is a Pokemon version of Final Fantasy. There's a Pokemon variant in Monster Hunter, and if you played Monster Hunter before, it's a game about you having a big weapon, kill a big monster, make him your new weapon, make him your new clothing, and then you fight the next monster to make him them your bitch.
yeah. See, so I really have no idea what I'm talking about when it comes to Final Fantasy, and I'd love to be able to.
No, Final Fantasy is definitely something like
Yeah.
I would suggest. Um, there's been an announcement. There's been an announcement for it to be ported onto PC, but I would suggest for most people is the recently made Final Fantasy 16 because it's an action RPG. You don't have to know the timelines in the multiverse of Final Fantasy as a franchise, but I feel like it's an easy entry for people just because it has the same combat director as Devil May Cry 3, Devil May Cry as a franchise. And if you've played action games similar to that hack and slash, even the game developer, uh, combat director for that game, can play the can fight and beat the monsters you can't fight. So to watch him at the TGS like show or interview regarding this boss, regarding the combat style, it's been pretty good. It's unless if you like action RPG, then that's a great way to get into it. But if you want to spice it up, I would probably say 10 is a good suggestion because of its story, where it's a your where it talks about a Final Fantasy focuses on the wrong protagonist, where your main character is not the protagonist, but it has a deep story that revolves like a cycle of an Ouroboros, if you will, a cycle of rebirth and calm before the storm. So I don't know. Yeah, I would be because like I would be happy to talk to you about Final Fantasy at a different time. But this kind of that kind of conversation with Final Fantasy does bleed into an article I want to talk about, but then might be for another time. We have That's all the time we have for this discussion. Um, can Would you like people to find you or any closing statements you want to let people know?
I'd prefer if people didn't find me.
Of course not. Of
Uh,
course not. No.
yeah.
But
So nothing there. I'm not gonna give myself any sort of shout outs at all.
no.
Um, closing closing
Is there?
segment here, I
Uh
guess,
huh.
is just that I don't know. It's a good topic of discussion. I think that there's probably going to be some other topics of discussion that'll come up in the future that we'll have, and looking forward to that time as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Uh, is Could you actually? Can you name a game? But before we end the video, can you name a game that's not on this list that you think is the darkest timeline to be a part of? The darkest uh place to be a part of because I don't because out of all these lists, I do not want to be a part of Outlast. If I had to be isekai'd into the worst possible scenario possible, I do not want to be a part of the Outlast world because it's definitely too real, and it definitely plays on science that can be tangible, if it makes sense. Because if you've for people that play Outlast, they will understand that there are certain practices in Outlast and Outlast 2 that feels pretty close to home, and the only thing that is very sci-fi like are the hallucinations that are made in your head. So none of the horrors that you fight are actually real in a way, but maybe they are real, maybe they're not. It plays on your psychology and your ability to be a proper storyteller because even the side characters to the game question your sanity as well. So, are you telling the truth? Is your experience a real thing? I don't know. Well,
Yeah,
what
I
game would
mean,
you suggest?
I could totally pick a game that would make sense to a lot of people. Like something like The Last of Us or something like that, right? I think that'd be like an easy answer for me. But going a little bit more in depth with something, I'm actually going to choose Minecraft. Now,
Minecraft?
that might sound crazy. That might sound crazy with little like music jingles and stuff in the game. But I kid you not, that is probably the loneliest game that exists. And the reason why is you're the only character in the game. Sure, you can come up on a village where there's villagers, but they don't talk to you. They go squeak, squeak, squonk, and that's it. And you have
and
no interaction with anything in the game. You can work yourself into a cave where you have no idea how to get out of it or where to go from there. There's out of nowhere spiders and things that will attack you. And for me, at least in my experience playing the game, I'm not very good at the game, and I've only played it. I haven't played it in a long time, but it comes out of nowhere, and you'll be like minding your own business, thinking that everything's okay, and the game will force you to not feel that way for very long. It's easy to get lost. The entire thing is procedurally generated, so it goes on and on and on and on and on. And you can spend an entire 24 hours in a block world and make no actual progress in the game whatsoever. And that's terrifying.
that
It's
is
terrifying to think that you could be the last person on the earth, and the only purpose that you have is to just build stuff and maybe tend to some pigs, right?
tend to some pigs, tend to some like animals you've domesticated. But
And there's no bigger purpose. There is no bigger purpose to you in the game than literally just whatever you want to do as the last remaining person on Earth.
yeah, and I find it very creepy to where like the end game is loosely tied to figuring out how would you have figured out what the Ender Gate was, and how would you know where to go to find the Ender Dragon? Because like you would pop like randomly, it would pop up an Enderman for you to fight, and you don't know what to do with it. It's like a very tall and dark skinned Slender Man, and if he touches you, you're practically dead or not. And like the whole
But
idea of like, huh?
here's another scary thing. What
Mm-hmm.
happens after you beat the Ender Dragon?
Yeah, like are you stuck in that world? How do you find your way back?
You go right back to Block City, you know?
Yeah, and then like if you wake up, you might accidentally wake up into a new world, where maybe you have to find the Ender Dragon again. You maybe have to find materials to make the Ender Gate again, and even then, the isn't the Ender Realm a version of Hell, kind of, because everything's
Yeah,
on fire. So like, that's pretty
you'd
scary.
think so.
Now that you describe it in that kind of way, it feels like a horror game, but it's sold to children. The game devs
Yeah,
have
because I
sold the
think the
children
mask
thing.
it's masked so well. I think that the freedom within the game is what people focus on more than anything else. But if you really think about it, that's a really sad and lonely game.
Is it a lonely game if you wake up in Minecraft dungeons? Minecraft
Like with
dungeons,
other people.
yeah, like yeah, basically, because like Minecraft dungeons
I think that's different.
is
I think that's totally different. Like I get that you can play multiplayer, but you could also play like co-op versions of some of these games,
mhm.
and having that extra person there with you, a real person, I think changes the dynamic of the environment a little bit.
Would it make it
So I think when
harder?
you're single player,
Would it make it harder because it's a what if scenario where it's Minecraft with Diablo mechanics?
uh,
Does it make the world less easier to live in or harder or like better to live in?
I would say adding anything interaction wise with other characters or people, I think would always make it less dark.
Okay. Okay, it's just so like so Minecraft is the darkest timeline to where you wake up. You have a world's worth of things to explore and there's nothing and no one to tell you in your language the end game to your life here.
Yeah, and then you do figure out the end game, and then you go right back to block world, and it's all the same stuff that you had just been trying to figure out the meaning of.
Uh-huh.
You figure out the meaning, and then you're right back to block one.
And then you think to yourself, what was all that for? I fought the Ender Dragon. I saw the credits, and I'm back to where I started.
And all I got was this stupid Ender Dragon eye, or whatever you get.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it doesn't do anything.
I saved the entire
It
world.
sits in your inventory.
I saved this. I saved the world, and all I get is the stupid bug. And that's
That's
Minecraft.
That's my pick. Minecraft.
That's Minecraft.
I think it's a good pick.
That's a good suggestion. That's a good suggestion. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much, Ryan, for discussing with me. And yeah, if he's up for it, we'll do something more. But thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, my name's Tyler. I'm your friend, and I'll see you next time. Bye.